Hello, welcome to Interesting Times. This is the initial episode, the inaugural episode, the introductory episode, whatever you want to call it. It's just basically an introduction to the channel, who I am, why am I talking about this weird stuff, and kind of where we are currently. All I'm trying to do is have a little bit of a conversation about basically the weirdness in the skies, how it relates to us, what's going on. I personally have interacted with what is now being referred to as unidentified anomalous phenomena. It formerly would have been called UFOs. Part of my background, I worked for the Air Force. I worked as a weather forecaster for the Air Force during conflict times. I provided weather forecasts for Iraq and Afghanistan, places where we had very data limited resources. There was a lot of use of satellite on my part. I did extensively use geostationary satellites and various other satellites to be able to forecast and extrapolate the data for what I was working with. I never once encountered anything weird with UFOs, never had a conversation about what to do if you saw a thing. And I mean, you hear a lot in the media currently about, hey, we got to be in a skiff. We got to be in a skiff. Well, I mean, I've worked in a skiff. Like my whole shift was in a skiff. It was, not granted, this was a long time ago. This was in the mid 2000s. But cell phones were a little bit differently. They weren't like the computers that they are now, but you still had flip phones. People still had cell phones, and you had to leave them outside the building or outside of the room that we worked in. So I worked in a secure facility. I had clearances and all that stuff, and it was never a thing that came up. And then, about 2017, the Pentagon said UFOs were real, and there was a series of videos released with that. That really got my attention because when you're doing the weather, you do have to be somewhat familiar with airframes and the capabilities, not to the extent of the pilots, but you still have to know their limitations, kind of how the weather is going to impact them, what their sensor capabilities are, targeting systems, etc. You become very familiar with the airframes. Now, when those videos came out, I was very perplexed because from what limited data I had about those particular instruments, everything appeared to be legit. And it came out with a report where the Pentagon said UFOs were real, but this was like 2017. I believe it was at the end, like towards December timeframe. And nobody heard it. Nobody heard it at all because the political tumultuousness of the time. While I'm making any kind of commentary on this channel, I will do my best to refrain from any kind of political commentary because this topic it transcends politics. This is kind of, you start asking questions in this vein and it leads to the biggest questions all of humanity has to offer. And it's not a situation where it's a Democrat or a Republican thing. What I can say is the political atmosphere at the time was so different from anything previously. Like the Pentagon came out and said UFOs are real, but nobody heard it. I've talked to people currently, 23, 24, 6, 7 years after the fact. And people are like, no, the whole Pentagon didn't say that. Like nobody heard it. Like, and I don't know if it's a matter of like not wanting to process the information because it's difficult, or just people are wrapped up in their own lives. But after I kind of became aware, I just started asking questions. It's almost like one of those things, the more questions you ask, the more your involvement's going to be. And a couple years after that had occurred, this was 2019 going into 2020. And it was kind of after, well, no, I guess it would have been the end of 2020 because it was after the COVID happened and I had a job where I happened to be responsible for Oklahoma and Utah for the company that I work for. This was after the travel ban was kind of lifted and, you could move around a bit. And I was out in Utah and, at this point, this was like 2020, end of 2020, beginning of 2021. I'd been out of weather for, at this point, a long time. And I wasn't a guy that was like, hey, I want to be a weather guy for the Air Force. Like I tested well and I got assigned to the job, but I kind of just wanted to work on trucks because I like working on stuff and putting stuff together. So it wasn't exactly my dream job. And kind of the way that you brain dump calculus and whatever it is you get in high school that you just don't want to retain. I kind of did that with atmospheric physics and thermodynamics and weird stuff that I just would never use. And I just took a picture. I was outside of Beaver, Utah, and I just took a picture outside of the plane, just a picture of a cloud. And a couple days later, I'm looking at this photo and I see a couple of anomalous objects moving off in the background. And then I realized that they had a different, well, actually, I only noticed one at the beginning. And I noticed this one thing that looked like it was purporting itself to be a cloud, but it had a different reflectivity and a different albedo. And it was moving independently of the cloud. And that really got my attention. And I was zoomed in on it for a very long time trying to make out what this was. And about a week later, I kind of zoomed out and was like just trying to get an overview because like the instinct is to just zoom in on this thing. What is it? What is it? And as I zoomed out, I realized off in the distance further back, there was another one. And it just looked like a little white sliver, but it looked like it was part of the cloud, but it wasn't. And it was moving independently. So that really kind of woke me up and was like, what in the world is going on? So at that point, I started doing research to, UFOs, anomalous phenomena. I did not grow up as a UFO guy. I was familiar like anybody would have been in the 80s. UFOs were kind of a topic, but I knew people that were like UFOs are a thing. And I was like, yeah, that's ridiculous. You do shrooms. Of course they're not a thing. And I spent most of my life kind of walking a path where I have somewhat of a scientific background. I've worked in jobs where I was a resource. I did well at what I did, and I thought I had a grip on what was going on. And when the UFO thing came into my life, I started asking questions, and that just kind of broke apart my entire nature and understanding of reality. Starting at point, I don't understand anything about reality like I thought I did. And that's kind of the starting point. And that's why I'm putting together this channel and trying to put this out there, is because that kind of, it kind of blew my whole world apart. I believe that I'm dealing with ontological shock, so to speak, where you kind of have to, everything that you thought that was is no longer a thing, and you don't really have an anchor point. So you're kind of looking for what is, and I have spent a lot of time in the physical and the metaphysical. I've done a lot of research and various different things. I'm going to talk in this channel about my interactions, the things that I know. I'm not going to try to speculate on what things are. I'm not going to purport that I have any answers. I don't. I definitely have more questions. The more questions I ask, the more questions I have. I can put it like that. And so this channel is kind of for anybody that happens to, because it feels like there's a wave of consciousness shifting that's happening across the planet. I feel like I'm caught up in that wave. I don't feel like it's one of the initial waves, because I talk to people that have extensive knowledge in areas that would be considered woo-woo, but things that I know to be a fact, because since I've been interacting and researching UFOs, I've had my own experience. I had an experience outside of catching it was like everything is like flips a switch to the next thing. And when I became more aware of a certain thing, then it made me able to see another thing. And a little bit after that, it wasn't too long, it was like 6 months after, I had an experience in my backyard where I had a reddish orange orb over my house at 6:53 in the morning. And our mind is so quick to dismiss what we have and what we've seen. It was 6:53 in the morning, and I'm also, part of the weather training that I got was how to be a trained observer of weather phenomena in the atmosphere and to tell what's going on in the terrestrial sphere. I walked out, this thing's at the noon o'clock position in the sky at 6:53 in the morning, and my head's just like, oh, it's the sun, I didn't even think about it. My dog was old and she was sick at the time, and I was focused on her, and I think that's like most people are. We're just not looking up and we're not paying attention. And I was tended to her, but my head was just kind of nagging at me. It was like, I kept looking back up and I was like, wait a minute, this is off. Like it's the wrong time. And then I started realizing my brain was just going through all the list of the things that it possibly couldn't be. And then I saw some like upper level cirrus that kind of like went past it. And I had the realization that I was like, oh, I'm looking at something that's within the terrestrial sphere, like within the dome of our atmosphere. And once I had that realization that I was looking at a thing, there was a thing that I didn't understand that was in our atmosphere and it was interacting with something, I got washed with this just feeling of like a kid. Like I wasn't in trouble, but I was witnessing something that was not intended for me. And I just felt overwhelmingly like I needed to go back inside because this wasn't meant for me, but also at the same time, it was like feelings wrapped with abstract thoughts and ideas. And one of the ideas and feelings that I had was just this overwhelmingly compound idea that we're just not doing it right, like as people, as everything. And I haven't been able to shake that since that day. And it's kind of fucked with me the entirety of the rest of my life. So I'm going through trying to think about things, and I go through things, and I did end up hearing it was an interview, and I believe his last name was Swan, and he was talking about a remote viewing session where he remote viewed into the Phoenix Lights, and it was a UFO incident in 1997. It was like the most mass witness UFO thing at the time. I'm not familiar with this. I don't know. I was 18 in 1997. I was very aware of what was going on, but I didn't care or know about that. But when I was listening to this interview, he said that when he remote viewed into this area, this incident with the Phoenix Lights, he made a comment, and he almost used my exact words of my interaction. Like, he was like, they were aware that I was there. And I got this feeling that, like, I wasn't in trouble, but it wasn't meant for him and that he needed to go. And I had never looked up the Phoenix Lights. And so I go look it up, and there's these reddish orange to like yellow lights that are in a triangle formation. And there's all kinds of UFO lore about what that is. But the thing is if you take one of those individual lights and isolate it, that's what I saw over my house. That's the feeling that I had. I had all of that before I had even known about any of this or dug into any of that. And it's kind of like when you research one thing, it'll take you to another area. And after I had that interaction where I, for lack of better terminology, just so that you understand what I'm talking about, I feel like I connected. And I don't feel like I've ever actually disconnected, because after that, I do have incidents that are witnessed by my family and I have on photographic evidence, where I just would get a feeling like I'd get chicken skin on my shoulders. I'd get like, I don't know, just a knowingness. Like I would just feel like something was outside, and you go outside and you wouldn't see anything, but there'd be one star, and I would look at it, and I would have like this conscious interaction with it. Like it'd be like the way when you're interacting with a person and you're talking to them and you know that you're talking to a person, but that's the feeling that I got from a star, and that was super weird. So I took several photos and zoomed in on the photos, and they are definitely curiosities as to what they could be. Through this channel, I'm going to explore those photos. I have several photos of stars that basically I interacted with that for unidentified anomalous phenomena. I don't know what it is. I can tell you that it's led me down a path of ancient knowledge, down a path of religiosity, curiosity. A lot of it is, I think, as much as we can process. And I don't know where that limit is going to lie. It feels like we're on a journey together where we're getting ready to go through something. 2024, I told my kiddo, he's almost 20, but I was like, I bet you $1 in a donut at the end of the year, we could just sit back and be like, well, that was a weird one. Because if you paid attention to, current testimonies at Congress with David Grush, with David Fravor, with pilots that have encountered things, this is a thing that's real. And people are going to be able to look at their testimony and discredit it because they're like, oh, because the blah, blah, blah. And you can enter X reason that you're discrediting them. It doesn't matter. It wasn't you. You didn't see it. You don't know. my point of view is I've interacted with a thing that shook me to the core because I walked around with a certain understanding. I was just one of those kind of assholish militant atheists. You couldn't tell me anything. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to get it twisted for a minute. I'm not religious, but I did approach. I think I've got multiple. I've got the Quran laying around. I've been revisiting the Bible uh, because I'm like, when I'm looking at this, I'm like, as I try to tell, and I'm in the kind of the Bible Belt of Oklahoma, and as I look at these events that have occurred to me, I'm like, if I looked at this through a religious lens, like if I was a Christian and these things were happening to me, I would be thinking that I heard the voice of God or an angel, or I had been visited. And as I start scrolling through the Bible, there, of course, some of these accounts, they sound like people that came across some weird shit that we can't explain. And it seems to me like this is a thing that has existed over all of humanity that we're just now becoming aware of. People have taken their terminology through their man lens of being a human and said, hey, this is what it is. But we can't comprehend. We don't have that capability. I kind of, behind all the stacks of some of this stuff, I've got guitar magazines going back to like the 80s. And I was sitting there looking at one, and there was an ad for an Apple computer. I don't remember which one. I don't care about. I'm not a tech guy. I'm just not. But I was thinking about that computer. I was like, if I brought that computer right now and plugged it in and got it working, and miraculously everything still works on it, it's still only going to be able to process it as best as it possibly could at its peak performance with what it was designed to do, and it's not going to be able to outpace that. It wouldn't be able to chug all of the information like the AI and the internet, and it's too much. And I can't help but think that we have an organic biological computer. It may be an organic biological quantum computer, but it's still organic and biological, and basically just that by itself limits its bandwidth, just straight up. And I kind of started realizing that there's just a lot that I can't understand. And I've been furthering myself over the past couple of years. I actually intended to start this channel about a year ago. And I got heavily inspired by several podcasters. I'm always going to name the people that kind of inspired me to do this, but Kelly Chase and the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast, I found her kind of early on when she started doing that. And when this all started happening to me, I was like, my criteria is unless you've had at least my clearances or were a government employee or better, I'm probably not going to listen to you. And when I found hers, I was just enamored with her presentation and her diligence and her research. I was blown away. And if you start at the beginning of that podcast, you will go down the rabbit hole that opens up many other questions, and it takes you to consciousness and reality and religion, spirituality, metaphysics, physics, everything. It seems like the UFO thing is like the thread in the sweater that is the initial pull. So her podcast was so inspirational to me. I was like, man, I've got to make this podcast. I got to do a podcast so I can tell my story and talk to people. But here's the thing, like, I'm busy. I've got a normal job in life. I'm not going to be able to put together the information in a presentation in the way that like she does. It's extraordinarily informative. I think that my role is going to be more like a reactor, a commentary, or I'm going back to like 2001. This is my video blog. I'll make a commentary about what's going on and kind of how it relates to my interactions with what I've seen and what I know to be true and what I know to be real. I'm hoping that through the course of this channel, we develop a conversation and have interviews and discussions. I'll invite people that I know to just have a conversation about, what they've seen and what they know, because somehow this is not a thing that it's not being covered by mainstream media. It feels like it's something that's still not okay to talk about in a normal capacity. I don't get it. But this adventure that I've been on, it's been startling. There are moments, and I believe that throughout text in multiple facets, it's referred to as a dark night of the soul. But when you start asking these questions and you start elevating your own level of consciousness, you've got a lot of darkness that you have to wrestle with. It's not exactly funsy. I've had a couple people that were just like, man, I wish that I would see something like that. And I'm just like, I don't know that you do. Because most of the time I spend my time walking a line of, am I becoming enlightened or am I losing my mind? So on that note, that's what this channel is going to be about. I'm going to slowly start introducing videos about my specific occurrences that I noted just now, and then hopefully open some discussion and move further towards maybe not an understanding, because I don't know that we're even intended to, but maybe a better understanding that we don't understand. Because if people would kind of back up a little bit and just have a view of the totality of what this situation is, like just back up and be like, wait a minute, you all are running around screaming about who's number one on which political side and which country is better than another, when if you're looking at some of the text in the government documents and they've got terminologies like hierarchy of beings, or then if you extrapolate off that, you can understand that not only we're not number one, there's going to be a series above us. And maybe we don't have the role that we think we do, or that we've been told we do within this universe. Maybe we need to have a better understanding of who we are and what we are. I feel like everybody's sharing so much information and you're able to get it so quickly, especially when things go down. And based on the stuff I've seen on the internet recently, it's just not me seeing weird stuff. It's out there everywhere. So I'm hoping this channel can be a place where if you feel like you're losing your mind, well, come and join me. I'm going to talk about it, good and bad. I'm not going to put polish on anything. I'm just going to be as straightforward and as honest as I can be. Some of this is terrifying. Some of it's enlightening. It's kind of like the yin and the yang. For as scary as you think it possibly could be, it's every bit as wonderful. Thank you all. I hope you have a good day.